Hello and welcome to Relax Radio. My name is Monju Hoque and today we are going to be talking about everything to do with money. So welcome to our new show, Money Talk, with me, Monju Hoque, and Ripon Ray. So, Ripon, thank you so much for agreeing to do the show every week. Every week, Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. I think this is going to be a fab show for everyone that's facing any sort of financial difficulties especially during COVID.
Absolutely. I think now is the time we need advice and information on money. We need information on the benefit and what types of benefit you can claim. We need support with all sorts of issues, really. As you know, if you're a renter, how are you gonna afford to pay your rent? If you're a mortgage owner, if your job goes, what do you do? So there are so many complications. There are so many issues. I just don't even know where to begin, let alone your listeners.
I think actually it would be really useful because I know you've got years and years of experience. You know, you're a specialist in this area. Why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about your background and how you came to specialize in this area?
Very good question, actually. I remember working for a publishing company, and while I was working for a publishing company, I thought, what is the point of doing the job which has no community value to it? So I decided to do a conversion to law degree whilst working full time with the publishing company, and then once I finished the course, I ended up volunteering for local charities. Whilst I was doing that, a local charity in the East End of London, giving advice in housing and possession proceedings. So it's really primarily about homelessness and housing. Whilst I was doing that, I ended up working by accident, working for a payday lender. So then I was working for a payday lender in their litigation department. So really it's all about recovering contractual money that is the lender that is entitled to. And of course, I've learned the rules around lending from the point of view of a payday lender. And of course, looking at it in the context of litigation. And then I ended up looking for another job, work as a debt advisor. So I've been a debt advisor for over 7 years, really. And in the meantime, developed other knowledge in the context of consumer protection, having become a director of a credit union where I wrote the policy of the credit union's enforcement policy. And currently, I am a regular, expert on BBC Sussex with James Cannon. And I've been on Moneybox as well as Asian Network. So I have been around primarily focusing on money.
And now, obviously, from that, we've decided that, every week we're going to be doing this show, Money Talk.
Absolutely. And Monju, you and I have been talking about this for so long. It's all about us getting together and start sharing what we know to others, as well as help others who may find it difficult to get hold of the information they need in order for them to live a easy and secure life.
And especially during these times of COVID, I mean, you've mentioned homelessness and you've also mentioned sort of financial issues that people are having. And obviously at the current time is probably one of the most difficult times people are facing in possibly the last decade.
Absolutely. I think if you look at the data, even kind of collated by Department of Work and Pension, it will tell you half of claimants of universal credit has been in the last 6 months than the whole of 10 years put together. Universal credit came in, the actual policy was implemented in 2013, but now has been the most time where the actual policy is being tested in its extreme way. Because when it was initially implemented, that's one thing, but now when you have an epidemic of people losing their jobs, then in that scenario, a demand for claiming UC as well as other benefits had just rocketed high.
And for just before we move on from universal credit, one of the things I think would be really useful is because many people that I've worked with are very new to universal credit. They've possibly never claimed before. I mean, for someone who's never claimed, what is universal credit?
I mean, good question, actually. Universal credit is one of those things that you won't know unless you actually claim. You hear kind of abstractly, but ultimately it's basically a safety net. If you look at it like that, where you don't have any money to survive, or you suddenly lost your job, or your income has reduced, what do you do to survive financially? So currently in Britain, as well as in other parts of Europe, you do have similar kind of model whereby if you're struggling financially, the duty falls on the state to support you whilst you are in trouble. So one of the many policy, I suppose, implication is benefit system, and universal credit falls under that. So it is a means tested benefit where if you're struggling financially, you need support to pay for your living, pay for your children's costs, pay for your home. As you know, the moment you lose your home, how do you pay for your rent? So that is covered. A bit like, I suppose, insurance policy. If you lose your job, the insurance policy for you is that the state will support you. And one of the ways for the state to support you financially is through universal credit. But of course, there are many other things depending upon your circumstance. So ultimately, is a means tested benefit for your situation when you can't work, when you are ill, or even if you're working, your income isn't enough to cover your living expenses. So universal credit will, I suppose, top your income up for you.
I mean, it's really a consolidation of existing benefits, wasn't it? It was a combination of
yes. So
applying for before.
Yes, absolutely. So ultimately, it is an insurance, that's what you can say, policy where when things aren't going well for you, it's a way for state to support you. In practice, yes. If you look at it, old types of benefit that we used to have and new kind of benefit, what universal credit does, it incorporates number of benefits like housing benefit, which paid for your rent. It incorporates, let's say, for example, employment support allowance that you used to get if you are unable to work due to your disability. If you've lost your job and looking for work, it also incorporates that. And of course, I talked about support for your children. In the past, if you're low income and you have to support your child, but there isn't sufficient funds, child tax credit and working tax credit, whereby if you're working, but work isn't paying, yet your income is low, working tax credit would usually top things up for you. So all those things have been combined into one under one benefit model, and that is currently now called universal credit, which in practice, by default, get it 1 month, and most of the interaction usually done online.
And in situations where someone's not eligible to apply for universal credit, what other similar benefits are there that they can apply for currently?
I mean, there is the interesting thing about the benefit system, there is no one size fits all. We can talk about abstractly, and it is abstract until you and I come across an individual who will be facing right in front of us. And this is why you have various advice bureaus like Citizen Advice Bureau and so many other advice centers, because they advise on individuals. Since we don't have the individual, I can give you on a broad brush terms, but ultimately, if you look at it, the benefit system is designed in two ways, really. One is looking at means, i.e. what means have you got? Based on your means or lack of means, you can claim one set of benefits. So we talked about working tax credit, child tax credit, housing benefit, as well as universal credit. These are all means tested benefit. It will first thing ask you, have you got any capital? Have you got any savings? Those things will be taken into account. Then you have another part, which is non-means tested benefit. This is where we talk about really your actual circumstances, i.e. it doesn't really matter if you're a millionaire or a billionaire. In theory, you can still get it regardless. So for example, disability living allowance. That benefit is really designed for making sure that if you have physical disability, the income should enable you to be in the position as though you're not suffering from disability. So it's like a state saying, we are making adjustment for your situation. That adjustment is taken into account financially. So yeah, there are two types, means tested and non-means tested. So disability living allowance is one, personal payments, independence payment is another one, And of course, if you're of retired age and claiming now, you'll be looking at attendance allowance. But because there are so many different types, but I'm trying to break it down, and there is no one size fits all ultimately.
And as we're going to be doing this show every week, I think what we can do is we can focus on each of the benefits and go into further detail so people know how to go about applying for it. We can talk about eligibility and things like that. So for anyone that's just joined us, my name is Monju Hoque, and me and my lovely guest here, Ripon Ray, aka Dr. Det, will be here every week, Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. to talk about everything to do with money. And basically, we're here to any questions that you might have in regards to how you can maximize your income, if you're facing any sort of financial difficulties, if you've got debt, rent arrears, any type of questions relating to money or financial difficulty, please do. You can call us on Skype on the number, which I can't see at the moment.
But I'm sure it will show up later.
Yeah, so you can call us on Skype on 07582473473. That's 07582473473. We've just been talking about universal credit and done a little bit of an introduction into means tested benefits and non-means tested benefits. But we will be back after the break. Please do stay tuned. Hello, welcome back to Relax Radio and welcome back to Money Talk. Money Talk will be on Relax Radio every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. with myself, Monju, and Ripon, aka Dr. Det. So if you've got any questions relating to financial difficulties, money, income maximization, rent arrears, anything to do with money, then please do join us. You can call us on Skype on 07582473473. That's 07582473473. And obviously, as our listeners can see, due to COVID, we're not in the studio. We're both working from home. And if you want to join us, you will have to download a Skype if you haven't got it already. Also, you can watch us live on Facebook. I'm sure some of you are listening to us on the apps that are available both on Google Play and on App Store. So Samad Chowdhury has just said, very nice program. So I think this program is definitely going to be of use to people listening. Kamal is saying hi. If you guys if you have any questions, please do, post your questions, comment, because this is what we're here for. I mean, this is our very first show on this subject, and this is something that we're going to be doing on a regular basis. Please don't be shy. There is no, what's the word, Ripon? No silly question.
Absolutely, there is no silly questions. Unless you ask the question, you won't know what the answer would be. So it will lead you to a fantastic and amazing journey. We won't know unless you ask us.
So Ripon, one of the things that I think, if someone was to be, let's just say they lost their job and they really didn't know where to go, where would their first point of call be? I mean, what would your advice be?
When someone lost their job, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's a shock to you. It's always going to be a shock to you. It will be a shock to you as well. Think about it, Monju. You've worked for so many years. Suddenly, your employer says, I'm afraid there's nothing here. I'm so sorry, but we have to let you go. So naturally, it will be a shock to your system. It will take you a while to adjust. And it's normal. It wouldn't surprise me if you decide to close the windows, shut the doors, and you don't want to see anyone, because in a situation like this, last thing you want to be finding yourself is be unemployed. However, it is one of those things that we all have to go through. Once you've overcome the shock, it is about trying to sort out your problems, the actual problems. Problems may be many in terms of your home, in terms of your children, because don't forget, the moment you suddenly lose a job, the impact of it is not just simply felt by me, i.e. who lost a job, but also could be your wife, your kids, and everyone else around you. So that's why I think there is a psychological impact. And I think once you've overcome this psychological impact, then it's about financial. And you realize that once you've actually psychologically you prepared yourself, financially, it can get easier if you're ready to deal with them. So I think best thing would be, I would say, if you're in that position, is go online and say, in UK, job seeker, job center benefits. Because obviously, whilst you're looking for work, because you suddenly lost your job, look, what can you do to top yourself up? So if you go to, let's say, DWP's website, central government's website, you can easily claim for a number of benefits. Now, do you remember, Monju, earlier on, I told you about means tested benefit and non-means tested benefit?
Yes.
So now, let's move away from means tested benefit, which is what we talked about in the context of universal credit. But there are also other benefits that might be of use to you. But of course, don't forget, if you're self-employed, that's one thing. If you're employed, it's another. But if you're unemployed, that's what you said. Then let's deeper into non-means tested benefit. Now, I know earlier we talked about disability benefit, attendance allowance, disability living allowance, as well as personal independence payment. And those are disability related focused benefits and non-means tested. There's a separate category of non-means tested benefit as well. And that is based on the amount of insurance you have paid. Because don't forget, the whole benefit system is like an insurance policy for all. Yeah. But since you've worked for so long, and you talked about your friend who just suddenly lost his job, and obviously he is psychologically in crisis. So what does he do? So psychological crisis now out of the way. Now is trying to helping out financial crisis. So yes, looking at non-means tested benefit, you have contributory employment support allowance, contributory job seekers allowance, and those benefits you are entitled to regardless of how much income you have, simply because of work, and you work for about 2 years or more. As a result, you're entitled to claim that money because you personally contributed whilst you're working through your national insurance. So therefore, you can easily claim that. That is non-means tested job seekers allowance, non-means tested employment support allowance. These are just like disability living allowance. You're getting it simply because you have already contributed whilst you're working. So that's one thing. However, that may not be enough, because that's same as something like 73, £10 a week, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can get it, believe me, you will get it because you have personally contributed towards the national insurance. It's your money waiting to be seized by you. However, because it's not enough, then you might have to top it up with universal credit. I'm not saying you might be able to top it up because that fund isn't enough for you.
And also with the contribution-based ESA, JSA that you've just referred to, that's only for a certain period of time, though, isn't it?
Yeah, with contributory. That's why I say, because of the contribution you've made, job seekers allowance, you can get that. You'll get that for 6 months. Hopefully, before 6 months, you don't have to claim anything else. That's fine for you. Let's say if your wife is already working, and if she's working, paying the mortgage and stuff like that, you can claim that to keep it going for up to 6 months. So long you have contributed a sufficient amount, you can easily contact HMRC to find out how much you have contributed. Isn't a problem. And then hopefully within that period, you get yourself another job, hunky-dory, and you're back to you being a millionaire. Great. No worries at all. Do you see? See you later. You probably ignore me then, obviously. However, you might find that things are not working out because this whole pandemic thing is going for too long. It's annoying and irritating, and I'll be weeping and sobbing for longer because I'm unemployed. So then you may find that you may have to carry on claiming benefits still. Then we're thinking about means tested benefit, i.e. all the way claim universal credit until you find your ultimate job again, and hopefully you can rebuild your life.
One of the great things for contribution-based benefits, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, is that, say, for example, there is a couple and one party is working, the other party becomes unemployed. The unemployed party can still apply for contribution-based benefits, even though the other party is working.
Yes, it's because absolutely. It's because you personally have worked, because you personally paid national insurance. It doesn't matter if your wife is still working or not. Because of your contribution, you can personally get it without any issues, and you can get contribution-based JSA. By the way, currently the name has changed to New Style Benefits, or New Style. So yeah, you can get that. Yeah, it's so new these days. Then new universal credit and all that stuff. So you can get New Style job seekers allowance for up to 6 months. However, if you've lost your job and paid national insurance, as we talked about, and you have any forms of disability, you can get New Style ESA for 12 months. However, if your health is so bad, you can get it indefinitely.
Oh, wow.
Indefinitely, because you there's no pressure on you. You don't have to worry about work capability assessment, or let's say work commitment, for example. You don't have to worry about work commitment, so i.e. no need to look for work or prepare to look for work, so they leave you alone. If you're in supported group, then you're fine.
In terms of what you were just saying now, also at the moment, obviously this work commitment that you're talking about and this regular contact, I think is every fortnightly you speak with your advisor, you see benefit. I don't know what they're called anymore. The name keeps changing all the time. But the work coach, is that what they're called now? Work coaches?
Yeah, your work coach, caseworker, absolutely. You'll have your bespoke work coach the moment you sign up to you go online. But of course now things may be slightly different. Obviously before it was more like you've signed on, okay, you'll get your payment online. However, you still have to see your work coach at local job centre plus. So now different job centre plus might have different policies whereby they might say, okay, we won't see you face to face. However, I'll give you a call or something, or we'll have a Zoom conversation. So the types of conversations that we're having now is similar kind of thing they'll do to make sure, as you know, any employees are also thinking about how to protect their staff. So if work coach is working, the work coach needs to think about protecting himself instead of meeting people face to face to make sure pandemic is still under control.
And they're also being a bit more lenient with people, aren't they, in terms of like the job searches that they're doing. I find from when I'm speaking to people, they're saying that the whole process is a little bit more relaxed as opposed to how it was before. People were really struggling to apply, and it was kind of like it would take several weeks. It seems to be like this, the process seems to be quite quick from when someone does an application to when they get their first payment.
Yes, you probably don't know this, Monju, but I'm also a bit of a campaigner around universal credit since the universal credit was implemented. And yes, at first the policy was it was a mess. People waited months and months to get their first payment due to all sorts of complications. Initially, actually, you had to wait for 6 weeks to get, as a policy, 6 weeks. Now the policy have changed to 5 weeks. And moving on from that, it will be every month. That's what you'll be getting by default anyway. Now it's more 5 weeks. And yes, conditions were onerous, but now because of the situation, I think you're right. It has been relaxed a lot because the assumption is now it's more likely you lose your job because of no fault of yours, but the situation itself. So yes, even DWP had us up in a submitted guidelines, which shows that even if you're claiming for universal credit, even paying for your rent, you don't have to provide us evidence of your tenancy agreement, but a license agreement will do. So those sort of things show that the central government is being quite lenient to help people out in times of difficulties.
Which is great, especially for people who aren't, you know, I think I saw something recently which spoke about the rise in the number of people having to access food banks.
Interesting enough, yeah. So, I mean, when I was growing up, the whole idea of food bank was literally alien to me. I think the infrastructure of food bank did start really, I suppose, the moment we have saw changes in the benefit system due to welfare reform. And data and food banks data, trust will confirm that anyway. Yes, you're right. Once we've hit the pandemic season, if you want to call it like that, yes, the access to food bank has rocketed high. But at the same time, we have seen how communities have ended up working together to make sure the need of those who are finding themselves financially struggling are met, and therefore we are seeing food banks left, right, and center, where when I was growing up, it was unheard of.
And I think one of the great things that's come when I'm looking at reports, and I kind of try and avoid the news lately because there seems to be so much negativity, but it's great when you do read a story which is really positive. And I've been seeing lots of things on social media where communities have got together to help the more vulnerable, you know, and you know, possibly destitute families in their areas. It seems like, you know, I think this whole yes, this whole situation is very difficult. You know, this pandemic has impacted people's mental health, but also I think it's brought communities together. I think especially in places like London, where everyone is so busy with their day-to-day lives, that community spirit can kind of, it diminishes, doesn't it? Everyone's kind of like doing their own thing. And I feel in a way it's brought people together.
I think you definitely are right. It did bring a lot of people together. In fact, there are lots of WhatsApp groups that I'm part of where in the past, I would not even think about being part of a WhatsApp group where it's all linked with one street. You know, in my own area where I live, I know this one street and that WhatsApp group is named after this specific street. So it brings anyone who live here kind of together. And I'm seeing similar kind of trend in all other places where those who have certain, I suppose, skills, certain expertise, certain abilities, they are using their abilities to those for the benefit of those who can't. So for example, let's say if an elderly woman who is my neighbor, but yeah, she can't go to the supermarket, it's me who'll be doing the shopping for her to make sure she doesn't have to go out since she needs to shield.
Yeah, and it's those things I think that are kind of you know, this it's almost like something positive has come out of something so terrible. Obviously, there's been such a high number of loss of lives, and you know, I don't know. It's been difficult. I was trying to explain to someone the other day, and I said, you know, no matter how someone appears on the outside, everyone has their good and their bad days. Everyone has these their struggles, because obviously this is, you know, like normally you'd go away for the weekend, or you'd go on holiday. You know, you have some sort of break, don't you, from the normal kind of busyness of like work and family. But at the moment, I don't think people have that to look forward to, because we don't know for how long we're not going to be able to travel freely. And with the whole Brexit thing, how will that affect our travel within Europe? You know, well, you know, now that we've let, you know, there's so many unknown, you know, there's so many things that there's that question mark of what's going to happen, what's next.
Absolutely. So when obviously it's difficult to prepare for unknown, but
Yeah.
the moment you start preparing for long term, then at least when you face unforeseen situations, you're more equipped. So what I can say that when it comes to financial anyway, I mean, obviously there's so many different ways of preparing. How can you prepare for I don't know, an atom bomb dropping at your home? That's slightly over the top, but it's difficult to do. But when we talk about having a cushion, because currently as it stands, I'm afraid, if people between 16 and let's say 40, they have, when something goes wrong, they don't have even £100 to live on once they've taken it. Once you take away the essential expenses, that gives a shock to everyone's system, partly because we need to think of ways to save money for long term if you have money. Otherwise, when you find that shock, i.e. lose your job, you find that, okay, after a few days, money is gone, there's nothing to protect you and support you. So I think we need to think of ways to change our culture, where we start thinking about save, rather than what we used to have before, spend.
I want to talk a bit more about that when we get back from the break, because I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. For anyone that's just joined, you can join us on Skype on 07582473473. You can download the app if you're listening to us on the you can join us on Facebook, or you can download both the Relax Radio apps from App Store or Google Play. Also, shortly after the break, we'll also provide you with a mobile number that you can call us on if you've got any questions. But please do join in with any questions that you have. So we'll see you shortly after the break. Hello and welcome back to Money Talk on Relax Radio. Just before the break, we were talking with my co-host Ripon. We started talking about the sort of like food bank. Sorry, we started off talking about the food bank, didn't we? And then we were talking about how sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, and also talking, we were mentioning about looking forward to what's next. One of the things that would also be useful to talk about is obviously we spoke about some of the benefits that people can apply for. Yeah, in terms of if they lose a job or basically we're talking about welfare benefits, weren't we? What's out there for people, and also you mentioned sort of like being going on to the DWP website and applying for you can access that through the .gov pages to find out, and there's lots of information out there, so you just need to, and it's quite easy, it's really simple, isn't it? Just Google, put in what you're looking for. Even if you did a Google search on universal credit, if you were finding it difficult to find the actual link, but moving forward, maybe in our next show we can post the links that people can access, and maybe also just talk them through like some of the benefits that people apply for. But one of the things that I think would be really useful to talk about, because of obviously of COVID and what's happened, and the situation where it affected people's employment, a lot of people have obviously been furloughed, and I think not everybody understands this whole furlough situation, because someone can be fully furloughed, can't they? And also, I understand that some people are part furloughed, where they might be furloughed for an afternoon. This is something very new to me.
Yeah. I mean, currently the policy hasn't changed much really, but it's more like in the sense of still stands that if you are furloughed, the employee, let me get, the employer has to tell HMRC, look, I'm not paying this individual, I can't let this individual go. Can you please pay me so I can pay my employee? So that's what it is. So as it stands now, it still is the case. 80% of your salary is going to get paid by your employer via HMRC. So that's what it stands. But of course, it's subject to review, let's say by end of March, because that's when the government will look into it. But ultimate model is you can't let this employee go. At the same time, the employee can't actually work anywhere else. So you kind of left there like a limbo. However, because that you can't let this person go because you will need it. So the only way that person could be paid is by HMRC. But don't forget, it's the employer request HMRC. So employer has a button to press. And then the HMRC will then, instead of you paying HMRC, that's what you do through PAYE and so forth. But now it's the reverse way. So the HMRC pays you, pays the employer, and the employer pays your employee. And that's what really furlough is about. It's about making sure the person stays until the situation improves.
And moving on from that, the other thing that obviously people who are obviously struggling, you've just mentioned furlough just now. And how that works, but obviously also people who have lost their jobs are going to have difficulties if they've got, like, say, I don't know, debts that they have to repay every month. Let's just say, for argument, loans, yeah, or credit cards, or even mortgages. I mean, can you talk a bit more about things like the holiday payments?
Oh no, absolutely. I think holiday payments are designed really for, let's say, things like, as you mentioned, loans, hire purchase agreements, as well as new mortgages. So any credit which are regulated. And so, yes, the reason mortgages are regulated, partly because any mortgage products that are in the market need to be verified by the Financial or Conduct Authority, which is a regulator. So the same regulator regulates lenders, TSB, Barclays, Halifax, and so on, so on. So they are regulated, as well as any forms of hire purchase agreements. For example, if you purchase your car on a hire HP, that business model need to be registered. So that's why So holiday payments actually link with those sort of consumer credit types of agreement, if you see what I mean. So yeah, so the policy is, from the point of view of the regulator, i.e. Financial Conduct Authority, is that, for example, if you're unable to pay your credit card, so instead of kind of like keeping things in silence, talk to your lender, credit card provider, to say, look, firstly, I'm struggling. Secondly, my struggle is linked with COVID. You can't just say, oh, randomly, I'm struggling for the sake of it, because you may have been struggling before. So the criteria is, in order for you to get help during the pandemic, your financial trouble has to be linked with the pandemic. So yes, you can afford to pay because of your loss of your job, and that loss of your job resulted on the basis that the COVID and the pandemic prevents you from work, and as a result, you can't afford to pay the contractual amount. It doesn't matter if it's mortgages, it doesn't matter if it's HP, it doesn't even matter if it's loan or credit card. So once you've told your lender or even mortgage lender, the mortgage lender then has a duty to listen to you and provide you support. In that context, what you outlined, payment holiday, whereby what it means in practice is that the lender will say, for example, your mortgage lender will say, okay, we can see what's going on here. We have a duty to protect you and support you. So we'll do a number of things. For first 3 months, you don't have to pay us, because we are agreeing with you for not to pay. And that is called payment holiday. And also, if that problem carries on up to 6 months, you can have a payment holiday. And during this period, we are not going to tell the credit reference agency, and don't forget, any payments and non-payments you make or you don't make get reported to one of credit reference agencies that the lender has registered with. It could be Experian, it could be Equifax, it could be TransUnion. They're the 3 main credit unions in Britain. Anyway, actually, although most of them are Americans, you know. And interesting enough, so what will happen, although contractually you have defaulted, you can't afford to pay, but they will report to credit reference agency as though you have paid. Why? Because the lender agreed that you won't be paying, and they've accepted that you won't paying, and because your reason for not being able to pay is linked with COVID, then they're happy to let you go for first 3 months where you don't have to pay, second 3 months you don't have to pay, and those 6 months are called payment holidays. And after that, they have to look at the product they sold you initially. It may be that they might say, okay, in your mortgage in this case, we may have to think about, instead of you being on interest and repayment mortgage, maybe you might have to think about interest only payment for now until your situation changes in the future. But you can only get all those bespoke services once you have spoken with your credit provider.
So in essence, really, there's no consequence, is there? By taking I think because a lot of people were worried about taking a payment holiday because they didn't know what the consequences were, because obviously it's an agreement, like you said, it's an agreement between you and the lender. Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, there is no negative consequence in a sense of, like, let's say your credit rating won't be tarnished. However, clearly you are still going against the principal contract, isn't it? Where you have signed up to an agreement that you pay X and Y, Z amount per month, and you're not paying, and you're using a fair policy that says, okay, in times of tough times, we need to revisit how we respond. So therefore, you don't have to pay the contractual amount. However, you still have to pay the money that you haven't paid in the future, although it may not be now, but you still have to pay unless your credit provider says so, which is very unlikely right now. So really, my motto is, if you're struggling, you can request for payment holiday, but because you haven't paid for, let's say, up to 6 months, that payment needs to be paid for later, because creditors can say and are entitled to say that you must pay, maybe not now, but in the future. Are you
And
there?
obviously the interest builds up as well, doesn't it, for that period that you're not making those payments?
Yes. And the creditor has the right to carry on with the interest. Of course, if they want to use as a sign of good gesture, they can stop the interest payment. But it is a conversation that you need to have with the creditor and talk to the creditor. And the creditor is very supportive. You can talk to them and find out, will they charge the interest? It wouldn't surprise me that they will. There is no obligation not to charge. They can charge. But as a sign of good gesture, if they want to, they can.
And I guess it's just people know. I think also another thing I wanted to sort of touch on is that some people are obviously taking the holiday payment as a way to, there might not be a genuine need or a genuine financial difficulty that they're facing, but they've just decided that, you know what, they're going to take advantage. There is that danger, isn't there? That some people are going to take advantage of the fact that you can take a payment holiday.
Yes, in terms of taking the payment holiday, it really is because the creditor will ask you, why are you taking it? Is it reasonable for you to take it? If it's reasonable, it's best to stick with your original plan because ultimately it will come back to bite you because you have to pay it in the future anyway. So there's no way out. But really, this is designed for those, firstly, who are struggling financially. And secondly, this struggle has came about due to the pandemic. You know, it is the loss of job or loss of hours of work and all those things is consequential to the COVID, for example, or let's say you're not getting sufficient income coming through. So on that basis, you can use it. However, ultimately, all those things are temporary measure. But of course, as we will see, it is becoming a long-term thing. Then the lenders and the lenders regulators need to rethink and review the current existing model that they've got.
And I think it's really important for any of our listeners that are facing financial difficulty and have got regular payments that they are contracted to make with lenders, is that talk to your lenders, have that discussion with your lenders as to whether or not you can take a holiday payment, and you know, to talk to them about the financial difficulties that you're facing, because if you are really struggling, it's better to talk to someone and to find some sort of solution. Just before we move on to because I want to talk about rents later as well, and rent arrears and things like that, but one of the things that I did want to touch on is also you know, when someone is a homeowner, obviously they're not eligible for housing benefit because obviously they own their home. But if they've lost their job and now they're facing financial difficulty and they're not able to recover the mortgage payments, what is available for homeowners that are struggling?
Okay, so that's basically apart from payment holidays. So I can talk to you about other things beyond payment holidays. Now, clearly, your lender would be, you know, supportive. As I mentioned, about 3 months, 6 months, and so forth. When it comes to financial support that we're talking about, unfortunately, this is where I suppose the current policy let those homeowners down, because in the past you used to have interest-only payment toward your mortgage if you were a home buyer. So I wouldn't say homeowner, because if you're a homeowner, you own it outright. There's no mortgage to pay. But if you are paying a mortgage, ultimately the owner is the lender until you've paid the full mortgage and all the balance is cleared, then you're a homeowner. If you're still owning a property where mortgage is still due and you can afford to pay the mortgage to the lender, then the home is actually lender's until all the amount is paid for. However, in terms of financial support, this is where we have to be slightly creative. And I think if you go on your local authority's website, see if you're entitled to discretionary housing payment, or if you can look at it, let's say, for example, a financial hardship. If you go on, let's say, DW's website and look at interest-only payment, this is where you can get it. However, currently as it stands, the rule is you can only claim if you have been unemployed for 39 weeks. That is 9 months. And once you have been not claiming for 9 months, then you can claim a loan from the Department of Work and Pension that you have to pay back. You can pay back even after you've died once, or even the property has been sold. However, currently it stands, there is no financial support for homeowners when it comes to like a bit like housing benefit. That model doesn't actually exist for homeowners.
I'm guessing that's on the premise that that it's an asset, isn't it? It's worth money.
Yes, absolutely. You might be sitting on equity, either positive equity or whatever it may be. The expectation is because you have equity, you can sell your equity or remortgage your property, and through that you should be able to pay off. However, currently the only support you have is a loan that you can get, and that loan is about 2% a year, so it's not too much from the central government. And that is the only support you have. However, this is when you have to think outside the box, because we are in a situation where we have to think outside the box. Now, depending upon your wide other circumstances, because if you're a homeowner, but let's say, for example, you've been self-employed and you've been self-employed for more than 2 years or so, and there's evidence of you paying national insurance, you might be able to get 80% of your self-employment income through HMRC that will then be able to pay you and your payment mortgage. So there is no one size fits all. We need to identify not just simply the situation of their home, we also need to identify their personal status. Are they self-employed? Are they employee? Are they workers? What are they?
I think that's really interesting. I actually thought that the interest only payments were still available. I wasn't aware.
No,
a lot of people are aware of that.
No, interest only payment, that is a grant, like a replacement of, let's say, I think it disappeared in 2016-17, and then it was replaced with a loan where you pay an interest and you pay off that loan. I think you can get up to £200, £200,000 or something, to recover it, and that will cover your whichever amount you need. But you have to make an application for the loan with the DWP, and then if it's accepted, then you can. However, the criteria still is, even with interest only payment, remember, you still have to have not received a benefit for 39 weeks, and the same will apply even in the context of universal credit, where your housing element may not be covered. However, you can still get your personal living.
Thank you for that. We're just going to take a short break, and after that we are going to be talking about rent arrears, how to deal with rent arrears, because I think most people that are probably watching the show will either be renting, whether that be social housing or private renting, and I think rent arrears are something that are affecting a lot of people, and from that on we can talk a little bit about also evictions and things like that. So thank you to everyone that's been watching. This is Money Talk with myself, Monju and Ripon. Just stay tuned. This is Relax Radio. Do call us on Skype. The number's 07582 473 473. It's on the screen. You can call us from anywhere in the world. And as always, continue watching us on Facebook Live. You can also download the apps from Google Play and App Store. See you shortly after the break. Hello, welcome back to Relax Radio and welcome back to Money Talk with myself, Monju, and Ripon. Just before the break, we were talking about what financial support was available for homeowners. And from then, we were saying that we were going to now talk about rent arrears, because obviously rent arrears are something that's affecting a lot of people, especially during the current pandemic. And as we were saying, rent arrears can affect those that are renting privately or those that are living in social housing, whether that be council properties or through housing associations. So what can someone do when they have got rent arrears as a result of losing their job, for example, or whatever it might be, but they're facing financial difficulty and they can't cover their rent?
First thing to do is talk to your landlord. I think, believe it or not, now is probably the time your landlord is going to be very supportive, because it's inevitable that people are going to be losing their jobs and you have lost your job. It's understandable. And you may find that your landlord is going to be supportive. Your landlord may even say, okay, pay me a lower rate for now. Yeah. Again, you'll only find out once you've had that conversation. And obviously, if your landlord says, okay, you don't have to pay me for the next couple of months, great. That is an ideal landlord, but this may not be the case. Then the question is, what support is available, isn't there? So if it's about financial support and there's no one else to turn to, then we do have to turn to our government. And if you remember, Monju, I started with saying means tested benefit and non-means tested benefit. Now, as it stands, you have no income coming in. You need means tested benefit. So if you go back to then universal credit covers a number of things. Obviously, it covers your personal living, i.e. you need to feed yourself. It also covers your rent. So, another word, in the past, it used to be called housing benefit. Now, if you're a private tenant, there may be an issue about whether you can get the full housing benefit to cover your rent. And unfortunately, that's the reality of situations. If you're a private renter, it's very likely that universal credit may not, I'm not saying it will, may not cover your full rent. That is why it's worth having a conversation with your landlord to see if you can pay less rent now than when you had your job and you're working full time. Because currently as it stands, so to confuse you a bit, but you probably know this as well, any rent you can claim, it is boilable down to your local housing allowance. So for example, if you're a private tenant, on average, what a private tenant may pay if you have a single home, it depends upon the actual size of the property, number of rooms there are. Based on that, local area has a local housing allowance policy that will determine, based on size and rooms, how much you can get towards your rent from central government. So if it is covered within local housing allowance, you might be able to get your full rent paid. But it's very likely you'll get your full rent paid if you're a housing association tenant or if you're a local authority tenant, because usually those properties have a lower rent compared to private rental, obviously. So for a private rental, if rent is covered, great. If it is not, then the question is, what do you do? First, obviously, you claim your means tested universal credit, which will have money for your personal living. Secondly, you should also be claiming housing element to pay your rent, so long your landlord knows this. However, if you still feel it's not sufficiently enough, then you have to think about thinking outside the box, because last thing you want is for you to be in rent arrears. And in the past, if you are in rent arrears due to, I don't know, the benefit system or whatever it is, you can claim discretionary housing payment. Now, it kind of says what it is. Discretionary housing payment is designed to pay individuals who are struggling financially and can't afford to pay their rent due to no fault of their own. And you can say that the pandemic isn't your fault, loss of job isn't your fault, but it's due to pandemic. So therefore, you can top it up if local housing allowance doesn't cover your rent by making an extra application, discretionary housing payment, and that you make an application with your local council. And currently, if you read the press, you see central government has been pumping money into local authorities to support individuals in different ways. And one of the ways to support you with your rent arrears is through discretionary housing payment.
One of the things I have to say about that, is that some, there are, I feel that sometimes when in local authorities, there are certain periods where they might be more generous. But at the moment, it seems like a lot of local authorities are sort of applying the fact that tenants, when they have signed up with tenancies, should have had due diligence in terms of whether or not the property was actually going to be affordable for them in the long run. Because obviously, when you're talking about people looking for private rented accommodation, really, they should be seeking accommodation that is going to be within the local housing allowance, or if there is going to be a shortfall, it's going to be a shortfall that's small enough that they can cover should they face any sort of difficulty like loss of job or things like that. So I think in some situations where they're applying due the fact that the tenant should due diligence to what was in the longer term going to be affordable for them, they are declining.
They are declining, but I can only tell you in terms of what's out there. From the point of view of local authorities, they also have to think about, okay, if this person goes homeless, do we then have to deal with this person again on the phone and find another property that might be more expensive for the person, or have that person needs to be placed elsewhere? So obviously we're in a catch-22 situation whereby whatever happens, as advice is still needs to be provided by local authority, even though the housing might not be. So in such a tough time, I think even local authorities have to be quite creative, although we still know the amount of funds that are available for discretionary housing payment is still quite limited, and the pot is also limited. But from the point of view of the tenant, what option is there? Either you claim a universal credit, which is housing element, and claim for discretionary housing payment, or just carry on accumulating rent arrears where there's no income coming in, no rent is coming in from the point of view of landlord. It's very likely you may end up upsetting the landlord by giving the landlord something, then nothing at all.
I mean, is there anything else if DHP gets offered, and like you said, it's in the name, it's discretionary. There is no guarantee that someone who applies for it is necessarily going to get it, or it could be that it's that it's paid for a short for a short period. Because if I'm correct, they're kind of reviewed every 3 months type of thing, aren't they? You kind of have to
absolutely. Initially, it was 6 months, then it's gone down to 3 months. Then it wouldn't surprise me if they reviewed every month. However, you're right. The ultimate option it is looking for a smaller property, isn't it? And you have to look for a smaller property that is within your budget. However, obviously, we need to keep all our options open, including looking for another home. But the question is, during the pandemic, can you genuinely move swiftly and easily as though there was no pandemic? The answer to that is probably no. So I think now, in every direction possible, I suppose what's been promoted is that you stay in your home. And interesting enough, even if you don't pay your rent, ultimately, don't forget, even if you're a social landlord or even a private landlord, what the landlord can do, the landlord has to follow a due process to evict you, isn't it?
Exactly.
But the issue is, courts are saying we're not accepting cases. So in other words, if you're a landlord, and I'm looking at it from a landlord's point of view, if you're a landlord, you're saying, oh, this tenant hasn't paid me for 4 months. What do I do? Unfortunately, courts will not even look at your case if your tenant is less than 6 months in rent arrears, unless there are certain exceptions. One of them is fear of domestic abuse, and secondly is like antisocial behavior. Then they will look at your case. Otherwise, the courts are not even interested. And if you look at the Ministry of Justice's data, it will show you that since the pandemic kicked in, the number of cases that the courts have seen has dwindled to 2%. So in other words, I mean, the courts are not taking cases for these sort of things because the government policy has been, we're not seeing any cases. And the Minister of Justice, who administers courts, are saying, we're not doing it. Because at first, if you remember, landlords can serve a notice for 3 months, then take the tenant to court. Now it's 6 months because the focus has been on keeping the tenants in their homes rather than evict them during the pandemic. And the other thing is, even though you've taken the case to court, even you got your judgment through the courts, bailiffs are not going to be executing the enforcement because that's what the government has instructed bailiffs to do, unless there are exceptions to general rule.
And obviously that's something that will be reviewed, because obviously initially the whole sort of suspension of evictions was, there was a set date, wasn't there? And it's been extended again and again, because obviously we don't know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. I agree. It's meant to be reviewed in late February, but we'll see. However, the way things are now, the whole 6 months policy stands unless we're talking about highly exceptional circumstances. Those circumstances are something like domestic abuse, antisocial behavior, but rent arrears, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months rent arrears is fine. Keep the tenants there. If it's 6 months plus, then then you can.
So Ripon, thank you so much for talking about the sort of my brain just went completely blank.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
No, it's been really interesting because I think it's important, because all of the areas that we've covered today, especially with the what you've talked about, the 6 month suspension and the 6 month notices, like
yes.
This obviously buys people time, doesn't it, in terms of looking for alternative accommodation, but obviously, I mean, alternative private rental accommodation, because haven't they?
You're right. However, as you probably will know, yes, tenants may be able to look at alternative accommodations, but where will you find alternative accommodation? If you go through a letting agent, for example, as you probably know, Monju, letting agents are like any other creditors these days. They will check your credit rating. So if there are issues with lending and borrowing and bad credit, and if that shows, then obviously there may be an issue about the letting agency lending you a room. So we need to look into that as well. There are other complications arise. And as you know, these days, letting agents themselves have to do a credit check on you, don't they?
Yes.
So they do, yeah. So I'm afraid
they've got to make sure that the person that they're renting to is in essence going to be able to afford that accommodation.
Absolutely. In fact, weirdly enough, even currently, I found out that even social landlords check tenants' credit rating to see if they are a genuine creditworthy or not. So they can decide whether the tenants can afford to pay the rent. So this is the life we're living in. Although it's impacting you now as a tenant, and you may not be able to pay your rent, but the question is, does that affect your credit rating? Because credit rating may impact you in so many other ways. For some people, it might impact you in your jobs. Some people, it might impact you in your homes. Some people impact you with your car. We just need to see all those things. So yes, there is a tough time for a lot of people, yes.
So after the break, I want to talk about council tax. Because obviously the whole council tax, I think that's something that people, because originally back in the day, it used to be council tax benefit. It used to be a benefit that you had to apply for. But obviously over the years, it's council tax reduction, isn't it?
It is council tax. Yeah, absolutely. It is reduction. It's reducing the amount of tax you pay. Hence, it's council tax reduction. And then we can talk all about it in terms of why the model has changed.
Okay. So we're just going to take a short break. You've been watching Money Talk with me, Monju, and Ripon, aka Dr. Det, and you can join us in on our show by calling in on Skype on 0++. sorry, 0+44 758 2 473 473. And obviously, if you haven't done so already, please make sure to download the Relax Radio app from either Google Play or the App Store. We'll see you shortly after the break. Hello, welcome back to Money Talk on Relax Radio. If you've just joined us, we are doing a brand new show every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. and it's all things relating to money. So as it says in the title, Money Talk. So if you're facing any type of financial difficulty, whether that be rent arrears, struggling with loan repayments, credit card debt, anything, or if you want to know how you can maximize your income, applying for benefits, if you've got any questions relating to anything to do with money and financial difficulties or anything like that, then make sure to get in touch. You can post a comment if you're watching us live on Facebook. You can also call us in on our number. Also, just before the break, we touched on, we were talking about how we were going to talk about council tax. So what does someone do if they're struggling with council tax? Because obviously every single property is is obliged to pay council tax.
Well, not every property, but yes, by default, the expectation is you pay council tax if you're of working age and you're in a property that has a financial value, and the property may have rooms and so on, so on. So a number of factors play a part in order for you to pay council tax. Firstly, is the property itself. Secondly, is the person. So let's say, for example, if there's one person and one property, you get 25% discount. Yeah, depending upon the actual amount you pay based on the property. If you have two people living in the property, then you pay the full amount. However, you may have one person living in the property and the property. So the property is there and one person is there, but if the person is a student or if the person is like retired and is or let's say a student, that person will be seen exempt. You see, an invisible person. So that's why you need to think of not just simply the person, is the type of person as well as type of property. If the property is dilapidated, i.e., you can't be in habitation in the property because of the state of it, you don't pay council tax. So that's why the property needs to be for human habitation and it's in that condition. And secondly, people are living in the property. So once you have that, then you pay council tax. So then the question is, how much you pay? And usually you can find out by checking your band. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, band A to H or something. So once you know which band you fit in, based on the size of your property, then you know how much to pay. And then following on from that, do you get any discount? You can get discount if you're a single person of working age and living in the property. There we go, 25% discount. However, if you're struggling financially, currently as it stands, you can get with most, I'm saying something like 95% of the authorities in Britain will give you 90% discount. That's why it's called council tax reduction. It reduces you paying rather than by default you getting full council tax benefit. The model has changed. So it's about reducing it by 10%, reducing by 20%, reducing it up to 90%, and reducing is called council tax reduction. So yes, they can reduce up to 90% because of changes in the benefit system since 2013. So how do you get that reduction? It's simple, really. Whichever local council you're in, you just have to go and make an application for council tax reduction. Sometimes you might find that discretionary housing payment and discretionary council tax reduction are combined. How is because that's how the council decided to formulate its forms. However, go and talk to your local council to see how much reduction you can get for council tax. That's one thing, i.e. how much reduction you should be getting. And if you feel that you are still struggling to pay your council tax and this council tax reduction isn't enough for you to make your ends meet, then what I suggest you do is look at Section 13A. Section 13A council tax reduction will allow for the council to reduce further of your obligation to pay council tax. But again, it's a discretionary. Council can decide whether it can reduce it even more or not.
And obviously, if someone is having financial difficulty and they're not able to pay their council tax and they don't make an application for the reduction, there are consequences there, because I think a lot of people don't apply and then they're really shocked because they can actually eventually take it from your wages as well, can't they? Council tax is the one thing that they will chase you for, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Monju, you're totally right. If you don't communicate, you realize that things get worse. So yes, ultimately, the council, because ultimately council tax is what pays for your social care, pays for councils collecting your bins. Yeah. So obviously any of those public services that you get need to be paid for. And council tax is what pays all those public services. So that's why council is very keen on recovering the money. So if you are genuinely feeling as though you're struggling, there are ways around it, but talk to the council and you realize that you might get that support, both reduction as well as Section 13A council tax hardship funds you may be able to apply for, or even, yes, set up a reduced repayment based on your circumstances. But if you don't pay and if you don't communicate, they will serve you with a reminder notice. And if there is nothing happening at your end, final notice, and then they will summon you to magistrate court. Usually in London, they will take you to magistrate court in order to obtain a judgment against you, to make sure that the courts have made a declaration that legally you owe the money, and this will be called a liability order. Ultimate sanction for non-payment of council tax is a criminal offence, unfortunately, up to 6 months in prison. You can do that. That's why it's a serious matter. However, if you are working, they can recover the money from your salary, because they can make an application for attachment from earnings. If you're on benefit, let's say, universal credit, they might be able to recover from your benefit. And so, or even make you bankrupt. But of course, ultimate sanction that is imprisonment. So to avoid all the complication, best thing would be is, of course, do what you can, contact the council. It's best to pay something than nothing at all, because it doesn't look like you're avoiding paying or you're not willfully refusing to pay. The moment you appear to be willfully refusing to pay, that looks bad. Then it shows that your intent is negative and you're being dishonest. You don't want that. So that's why I always to communicate, talk to collections teams, talk to the enforcement teams. You'll also avoid bailiffs knocking on your door and accruing more charges.
And what you were just saying about making sure you pay something, or at least make contact with them, let them know of that you're facing, and if possible, pay something. That kind of rule applies to any kind of that applies to rent arrears. I mean, if you're having difficulty paying your rent, making sure you let your landlord know that you're facing difficulties. Pay something, because even if they do try and take action, whether that's a loan and you're struggling to pay, if you can evidence that you have attempted to pay, it always looks good, doesn't it? Because it's the courts, or if it gets to that stage, are more likely to be in your favor, because they can see that, yes, you were struggling, XYZ happened, and there was a change of circumstances, but yes, you have been engaging. Yes, you did keep your, the lender or the landlord updated of your situation. And I guess what happens is that sometimes when people become very overwhelmed when something like a loss of job happens, I think some people kind of bury their head in the sand, and that's actually quite dangerous, because it can allow things to spiral out of control.
Absolutely. So the quicker you respond, the better it is for you. And we don't want to get to a situation where you feel as you have to kind of, shove your head in the sand or something. So instead of doing that, best point of call is to talk, isn't it? So talk to your friends and talk to your siblings, talk to the council. You realize there's more support available out there. You'll only know once you start talking.
And I think the most important thing from what you've just said is that there is no shame at all in asking for help.
There is no, absolutely, I totally agree with you, Monji. The reason I think we're kind of used to the shame culture, aren't we? Yeah. We're shamed. I feel like, with me, I was growing up being ashamed of feeling ashamed. Do you see? It's weird, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, I'm ashamed of being ashamed. What is this? You're ashamed, full stop. However, now is not the time to think about being ashamed, because I don't think you're the only one who's suffering. And I think if you knock on your neighbor's door, you probably hear similar kind of stories to yours. And that's the interesting thing, I think, in terms of pandemic, is that what in the past used to be only me is suffering and others you thought were not. But the reality is now the table has turned a lot. I think a lot of us are suffering now. So therefore, suffering has been normalized. So therefore, supporting each other is also becoming normalized. So don't be afraid of asking for help, because you will realize that even local authorities are actually going bend over backward to support you. And ultimately, don't forget, if central governments are pumping money in local authorities, those funds need to be spent.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to talk more about this after we come back from the break. So for anyone that's just joined us, you're listening to Money Talk on Relax Radio every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. We've had a few teething issues today, but this is a regular show that's going to be on every Wednesday. So please do make sure you tune in. If you've got any questions relating to, I don't know, benefits, rent arrears, payment holidays, evictions, anything to do, any sort of think about maximizing your income, just make sure that you do tune in. Do join us on Skype. Call us in on Skype on +44 7582 473 473, and also you can also drop us a message if you're watching us on Facebook Live. Don't forget, you can also download the app on Google Play and App Store, so you can literally listen or watch us from anywhere around the world. And obviously, this is also streaming on YouTube as well. So we will see you after the break. Radio.
Relax Radio.
Hello, welcome back to Money Talk on Relax Radio. For those of you that have just tuned in, this show is about all issues to do with money. So that's from welfare benefits, maximizing your income, facing any sort of financial difficulties, literally anything to do with money, whether that be rent arrears, issues with council tax. We're here to answer any of the questions that you may have. So we will be here every Wednesday on Relax Radio from 6 to 8 p.m. So make sure you do join us. Do drop us comments in the comment section if you've got any questions. Do call us in on Skype, and don't forget you can download the apps from Google Play and from the App Store. And of course, my co-host Ripon Ray will be here to answer all of your questions. Ripon is obviously also known as Dr. Det, and he is a specialist in this field and will be, we are here to answer your questions. So please don't feel shy. Do join in. I think one of the things that I wanted to touch on from what we were talking about is about, we were talking about shame just before the break and about not needing to feel ashamed. And you said something that was quite interesting. You said you felt ashamed of feeling ashamed. And it's that kind of cycle, isn't it?
No, I totally agree. And it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like a vicious cycle whereby if you feel ashamed because you're not talking to anyone, you feel ashamed of being ashamed. So really the outcome is you kind of internalize something. And that is the worst thing you can do, is make things internal. And as you know, the moment you make things internal, you have literally closed the door to the outside world. And then the longer you leave it closed, you find that it gets even more difficult. So that's why the best thing to do when you are suffering is to share your suffering by talking to others. And as you know about this about the quote, Monju, problem shared, problem halved. Simple as that.
Yes.
So do you see? Yeah.
And I think the problem is, I think too often people are worried about being judged. And I think that's what prevents them from opening up. But I think all we can say to anyone watching or listening today is that people care. Don't ever feel that you can't talk. It's better you talk to someone. And it might be, it might be if you feel you don't have a friend you can speak to, there's surely, there will be someone. And also for people, if you see that someone's behavior has changed, check how they're doing. I think the most important thing we can do is be kind to each other. And as much as this show talks about money issues, I think also we need to talk about mental well-being, and I think we need to look after each other, because especially during such a time as this pandemic, where many people are isolated, they may not have a support bubble, or their support bubble is very limited in terms of, because they might be shielding, they might live far away, for whatever reason. A lot of people have very minimal contact with another human being. They might speak to people maybe through, we were saying, like, Zoom, electronic methods, like Skype, but they don't actually see people. And I think some people tend to, especially if they're not tech savvy or they don't have access to that type of technology, tend to withdraw. And I think one of the things you were saying earlier, you said local authorities have got lots of funding to help people that are, number one, facing financial crisis, but also I think local authorities and communities are also investing in making sure in sort of like befriending services, if they know there are vulnerable people, doing sort of like welfare checks on them just to make sure they're okay. So if you have an elderly neighbor, or someone who's shielding that lives near you, check how they're doing. If you're able-bodied, then there is nothing to prevent you from going outside of your house. Obviously, take the necessary methods, wear your mask, make sure you sanitize, obviously be careful. But if there are people that you can help, then go out and help them. I mean, it's only together that we are going to be able to get through these difficult times. We don't know how much longer this is going to go on for. We don't know if this situation is going to, in fact, get worse. I mean, at the moment, they're talking about this South African strain of COVID that's kind of like, and some, what is it? There's like 8 different postcodes across the UK that are now going to, they're going to be doing door-to-door COVID. Is it door-to-door COVID testing? Because this straight, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, absolutely. Some places like Woking, Kent, also parts of I think Hastings and places like, yeah. So even west of London, Haringey, even, so it's actually coming close to home.
Yeah.
Whereby, yes, people are doing that because we've seen a new forms of the same old virus, which has changed its structure a bit, so therefore is mutating. So obviously it raises a lot of questions around whether the vaccine will work or not. That's a separate one. In principle, it's best to have vaccine than no vaccine at all, because it's more likely, the survival rate is way much higher. So please, 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 any communications you have around vaccine, go and vaccine and vaccinate, because you will save yourself and save others by taking the vaccine than not. But yes, you're right. When it comes to mutation, there is a new one that we have found out. So the outcome of it all is that you're going to have to take extra precaution, and we just need to take care of ourselves and for our neighbors by being extra careful.
I mean, if you're going to go to the shops anyway, there's no harm in asking, like Ripon, you were saying, you do the shopping for your neighbors. We've got a couple of neighbors that we try and help out where I live. But I just think it's too often people turn a blind eye. But as I said, I think the community spirit within sort of like blocks of flats has grown. I think the community, because normally, like, you go past your neighbor and you might say good morning. That's about it. You don't really know much about them, because everyone, like I said before, is so busy in their day-to-day lives. It's just about, I think, all I'm trying to say, and I'm probably repeating myself, is just be kind to each other. I think I'm always saying that because it's so easy. Sometimes you might be having a really bad day, and you might go to the shop and say something to a shopkeeper, and that might be the final trigger for that person. So I think it's really important. Even when I get irate with someone and they frustrated me, I will always make sure before I leave that I say to them that I'm sorry, it wasn't personal. It's just that the situation, I'm irate at the situation, not you. And just reassure, because you don't know, you could be the tipping point for someone. And at the moment, the reason I mention this is because at the moment, I think the rate of suicide is quite high as well.
Do you know what, Monju? I totally agree with you. I mean, I think this situation is testing our abilities in every way possible. And think about it. Who can handle being in your own home 24 hours a day, and you only go out, you have to, just to do your shopping? It is not a normal situation. So obviously there will be a boiling point. And believe you me, I've lost my tether and lost my patience so many times. And I've also at the same time developed other skills, like how to bite my tongue and bite my lips without upsetting others. So those things, no doubt, bring out the best in you as well as the worst. But what can we do? We're in it together in such a way that it's no longer just about me. Now it's about whether my behavior or lack of behavior affects art. And obviously you and I may be stronger right now, but not everyone the same. So that's why I think we need to think more like, what is it like, not for me, but for others? So we need to behave like as though we are thinking what others are thinking. And it is tough for a lot of people. Look at, I'm not sure what it's like with you, Monji, but a lot of parents have to look after their kids and pay for and they work and look after their kids all at home, all at the same time. It is really tough.
I can imagine, because especially because a lot of those parents are still having to work from home. They cannot afford to take that time off. Normally when their kids are off on half term or summer holidays, they take a lot of parents will kind of work out the annual leave to take annual leave around that time. And if there's a couple, they will kind of balance it out so that one might take a few days, the other will take a few days, so they don't have to pay out that extra for childcare. But at the moment, it's like your teacher. I think one person, the way they explained it, they said, I'm mother, carer, teacher. She basically said she's everything. And she goes that, because the way we probably learnt grammar or we learnt maths, over 3 decades ago, for younger people now, they're like, it would be completely alien trying to help a young parent, for me anyway, with the type of maths or grammar that they required. And that's not because I've got bad grammar, but it's just the level of learning they're at. We're not natural unless you're a natural teacher, which some parents are blessed as blessed, but a lot of parents that I've spoken to talk about the struggles, and especially when they're on a work call and you've got a child screaming in the background. It doesn't show professionalism, but it's what it is. You have to make the most of the current situation, and I think it's really important that employers have understanding. So I think what some people have allowed is, obviously a lot of organization and a lot of businesses have the flexi working. So you've got but what they're doing, they're kind of relaxing it a bit more, because normally the core hours might be 10 to 4 o'clock. But usually they're the times that you're probably going to have, if the parent is going to have to help their child with schooling. So
I know, Edie. I feel for parents. I think now they're being. I know we talked about our health, and we need to take care of our neighbors if we can. Now that's one house and another house. But if you have all those things all at once in one home and more, then what do you do? Because obviously, don't forget, if you're working from home, in the past, kids would be expected to go to school. So at least kids are out of the way, and you yourself expected to go outside to work. So therefore, so you're okay. You're away from stress and strain, but you then have different kind of stress at work. Now, no doubt you're bringing everything at home, as well as, don't forget, the moment you're working from home, kids are also at home, they expect you to buy X, Y, and Z. And also you're utilizing electricity, utilizing gas more, and utilizing all other bills more without you going out, but in. So inevitably, expenses also go up.
And also, I think people, and another downside of it is, and I want to talk a bit more about this when we come back from the break, is the fact that I think when you work from home, it's very difficult to differentiate between your personal and your work. Because you might start at 8 o'clock and you plan to finish at 4, but then you're like, I'll do one more thing, I'll do one more thing, I'll do one more thing. And because you don't need to travel home, you're already home, you kind of end up maybe working twice the number of hours that you normally would. And sometimes, yes, I think it's proven to a lot of organizations and businesses that working from home does work, where people were saying you couldn't work from home. So that's the positives of it. But I think what it is that even walking to the bus stop, getting on a bus or a tube to go to work. I mean, I still go to work occasionally, a part of the week. So I've had that, but there's been periods where I haven't gone to work, and there is only so much of the same four walls before you start to feel a bit like I'm about to go loony. So I think everyone, no matter how strong you are, everyone has those good and those bad days. But I definitely want to talk a bit more about this when we come back from the break. For anyone that's tuned in, this is Money Talk with Monju and Ripon every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. This is our first show today, so please make sure to tune in next week, 6 to 8 p.m. If you do have any questions, please do make sure to post it in the comments. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can also join us on Skype. Also, next week, what we'll do, we'll see if we can also have because obviously we're doing the show from home at the moment. We'll also try and see if we can get a mobile number for those that want to call. But obviously, Skype is the best method. You can, if you haven't downloaded it, just make sure you download it for next week so you can join us in the studio. I should say our home studio, shouldn't I, Ripon? Our studios.
Yeah, it's all from home from now on. Do you know what, Monju, I haven't been to my office since March.
Oh wow!
So there we go.
You got to we'll talk a bit more about them when we get back from the break. So for anyone that's joined us, please do tune back in after the break. This is Money Talk on Relax Radio. Okay.